This is Miss Moore. Welcome to the Excel graphing tutorial. The first thing you should do is open a blank spreadsheet in Excel and input all of your data from your data table that you collected during the lab. The lab here that we did had two different parts, so I've set up two different data tables and I've put time values first just to remind myself that time is our independent variable, so that's going to go on the x-axis. And then I have my displacement and my velocity data for part 1 and for part 2. I recommend putting in descriptive titles for your values so that A, you know what they are, and B, it helps you when you're transitioning to your graph. So the first thing we're going to do is create a displacement time graph by clicking and holding on the time column header and dragging all the way down to the last displacement value. I'm on a Mac, so this might look a little different on a Windows, but you're looking for an insert menu and we're going to choose scatter plot here. You'll notice that this pops up on the sheet where we are working, but we'd like this on a separate sheet so that we can modify it on its own and then print it off on its own. So I'm going to right click and say Move Chart. Select New Sheet and change the name of this tab so that it's more descriptive. I'm going to call it Part 1, D versus T. And that graph tab will appear down here along the bottom. So a couple of tips for making your graph look awesome. We need a descriptive title, which is usually phrased in the form of dependent variable versus independent variable. So displacement in millimeters versus time in seconds. We usually include our units in the title. We also need axis titles. So on Mac, that's under Chart Design, Add Chart Element, Axis Titles, and we're going to have to add one of each. So I'll start with primary horizontal, which is time in seconds, and then I will add a primary vertical title, which is displacement in millimeters. Okay, the last thing we need is a line or curve of best fit. The way that we put this in is we click on one data point such that they all become highlighted, and then we right click on that same data point and say Add Trend Line. You can see you have a few different mathematical trends to choose from here. I'm going to go with linear or a line of best fit for my displacement time data. And that's that. We're done our first displacement time graph. So to get back to your data, click on the first tab, and I'll quickly show you how to set up your velocity time graph as well. Click and hold on the time column heading and drag all the way to the bottom. If you're on a Mac, hold down the Command button. If you're on a Windows, hold down Control and then click on the velocity header, hold and drag to the last value, and then you can release Command or Control. We're going Insert, Scatter Plot. Again, it'll pop up on this page right here. So the first thing we're going to do is right click, Move Chart, New Sheet, and I'm going to call this Part 1 V versus T. That'll appear down here at the bottom. And we will make all the same modifications as we did before to our title and our axes. Now let's go ahead and add our trend line by clicking on one of the data points so that they all become highlighted, and then right clicking on that same point and going Add Trend Line. Okay, So you'll notice that our trend line is a little bit skewed, and that's because Microsoft Excel is trying to fit the best line to our data, but we have this outlier point here at 0, 0, which is causing some issues. So what I would recommend doing is actually removing that point from our data, and you'll want to do this with any points which are significant insofar as that they're an outlier data point. So the way that we do this is we look for an option that says Select Data. This will bring you back to the main data table, and the first thing we're going to do is click next to where it says X values, and then there's a formula in there. We're going to click on the little colorful box, and it'll show you what values are selected for your x-axis. I'm going to click on the first non-zero value, hold and drag down to the last value, and then once you've done that, click on the little box again, and then I'm going to modify my y values by clicking on this little box. Again, clicking and holding on the first non-zero value, dragging all the way down. Click back on the little box and then say OK. Alright, so we've lost our outlier, but the graph has adjusted our y-axis for us. So the way that we get around that is by modifying the bounds of that axis. On a Mac, you double click and you'll get a menu that says Bounds. We want our minimum y value to be 0. So enter 0 and then push enter. That looks a lot better already. Okay. If you don't think that a line is the best fit for this data, you could have chosen polynomial or played with any of the other functions to choose what line or curve you think best represents your data. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me a shout, send me an email, or ask me in class, and happy graphing!